In 2013, after only 6 months of dating one of my best friends, I found out I was pregnant. I was only 21. I wasn't really afraid. I was more in extreme shock. Mainly because, well, I was never supposed to be able to have children. When it came to telling my boyfriend, I was nervous. I didn't really know how he would react. After all, we were young and had only been dating a short time. He might hate the idea. That morning, I got up early before going to work and I decided to take the test. I had always heard that it was better to take the test early in the morning. I remember every detail. I waited patiently, never once expecting to see the positive sign. I kept telling myself while waiting that I couldn't possibly be pregnant. Mostly, that's what helped me stay calm. But after 3 minutes of waiting in that small bathroom, the time had come. I took one look at it, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was actually pregnant. I was shaking, and I remember I instantly began to cry. Mostly because I didn't quite know how to process all the emotions that overtook my body. After a few minutes, I collected myself and decided it was time to tell him. I walked into our bedroom and lay down on the bed with my back facing him. He seemed startled. He knew something was wrong. He sat up and asked, "What's the matter? Is everything okay?" I looked over my shoulder and softly said, "You're not going to believe this. I'm pregnant." I looked at him trying to gauge what he was feeling by the look on his face. I watched his worried look quickly turn from worry to happiness, to the point he seemed extremely excited. His reaction really surprised me as he didn't seem the least bit afraid. He sat up and said, "That's it? That's amazing!" He laughed warmly and embraced me as I cried. "Aren't you scared?" I asked him amidst my tears. "No, I'm really happy." We were over the moon, looking forward to starting our little family together. This was until 6 weeks later. It was the day of my second ultrasound appointment. I'm not sure why, but I felt nervous. Maybe it was just anticipation to see how much the baby had grown. I lay there on the bed with my boyfriend and nurse beside me. I watched as the nurse prepared everything for the ultrasound, then gently began looking. I didn't know what to expect, but the nurse became really quiet, and I saw her face change from a smile to a frown. I immediately knew something was wrong. The nurse said I could get dressed. She left the room and said that the doctor would be in shortly to speak with us. We waited for what seemed like an eternity. My doctor entered the room and calmly sat us down and began to explain that we had lost the baby. Based on the ultrasound, it appears that this isn't progressing like a normal pregnancy. There is no heartbeat, and the baby is measuring smaller than it should. I'm so sorry. I was crushed. We both were. We had already told family about it, even though we knew that it was too early on, but we just couldn't contain our excitement. The doctor couldn't give us a specific reason why. She said sometimes things like that just happen. We were devastated. I was prescribed medication to help me pass the fetus. I was alone when it happened. It was one of the hardest and most painful things I've ever had to do. My boyfriend and I went to the pharmacy together, and after picking up the prescription, the pharmacist asked me if I knew what to expect. I was trying to hold back my tears as he explained that I would experience very uncomfortable and painful cramps, among other things. I nodded. I just wanted to get out of there. I felt like everyone was judging me or knew what had happened to me and what was about to happen, and I hated that feeling. I remember telling my boyfriend, "Please just get me out of here. I want to go home." He looked at me and held my hand tightly as we walked across the store and out the door. I began taking the medication as prescribed. I was to take it every few hours, and that would induce contractions and start the process. The following afternoon, while my boyfriend was at work, it happened. I remember crying on the phone when I called him, asking him to please come home. He was able to take the rest of the day off, and he held me for hours as I cried, and we mourned our loss. A year or so went by, and he asked me to marry him. I knew right away we belonged together. Aside from the love we both felt for one another, we had gone through something really difficult, and it had brought us closer and made our relationship stronger. We talked about having children, but we were aware of the risks we may have to face once again. In 2015, after much consideration, I had surgery to correct the shape of my uterus. My fertility specialist said that he would help me have better chances of carrying a child full term. We tried naturally for a few years with no success. In 2018, we returned to see the fertility specialist to begin treatment. We started early on in the year, and after a few months of shots and medications, we were ready for our first IUI. I remember it so vividly. The process was so quick, and I remember thinking to myself, that's it? This is what we spent a few grand for? But my heart was filled with hope. We were to wait for 2 weeks before testing to see if I was pregnant. But I knew right away it had worked. I felt it. I remember thinking that all of our stress and tears had finally been worth it. Our entire family had been around in our journey, so they were waiting to hear the news too. One morning, I went out and bought a test and took it before work. I'll never forget telling my husband over text message. The craziest thing was that even though I was relieved it had worked, I didn't feel an immediate happiness like I had always envisioned I would. Something felt off to me. I became angry at myself for not reacting appropriately at something I had wanted for years, something we had worked so hard to achieve. I told myself I was so lucky that it worked on the first try. I broke down and decided I needed to just let myself be happy. I texted my dad, and he was ecstatic. He always wanted grandkids, and his reaction melted my heart. I began to breathe a little easier, if only for a little while. Somewhere along the way, I started to feel strange again. I didn't know what the issue was, but I knew something was wrong. My first ultrasound was scheduled for 8 weeks, and I remember waking up one morning and telling my mom that I didn't feel pregnant anymore, that I knew something was wrong. My mom kept saying that I was just nervous and paranoid because of my first experience, but no matter what anyone said, I knew something wasn't right. On May 21st, 2018, my suspicions were confirmed when I went to my first scan and was told my baby had passed away at 6 weeks and 4 days. My heart broke into a million pieces. I now had 2 angels in heaven. I was so angry. I kept asking, why me? But my questions went unanswered. I was prescribed the same medication as the first time. Both times, I had what they medically referred to as a missed miscarriage. I had been through this once before, so I knew what to expect, but that didn't make it any easier. If anything, this time was worse. We had spent so much time off work for appointments and so much money we didn't really have just trying to make things work. It was physically and emotionally far more painful than the first time. I had to take a week off work because I wasn't in the right state of mind to be around anyone. I felt empty. I would lie awake at night and cry and wonder if I will ever get to experience the joy of carrying a child and watching it grow. With each day that passed, it seemed like someone I knew announced their pregnancy, and each new announcement sent me to a darker place. I would feel jealousy, and then immediately feel angry with myself because the rational part of my brain knew it wasn't anyone else's fault. I was broken. It's been nearly a year, and I've recently began to see a psychiatrist so I can try and come to terms with what happened. I decided that it's time to try to heal and to realize that some things are just out of our control. This doesn't mean I won't try again in the future, but for now, I think it's important to work on myself and allow myself to grieve for all that I've lost. It has helped me to be more open and to share my story. My hope is that by sharing my story, it will remove the stigma surrounding miscarriages. It's important for people to have a support group and to not feel alone through some of their darkest times. That being said, I am still on my journey, and although some days are much harder than others, with the help of my family, I am confident that with time, I will continue to find peace. Between 15 to 20% of all pregnancies in the United States end in a miscarriage for many different reasons. It is common for people to feel a lot of guilt and blame themselves because of the lack of knowledge around the subject, but often, no one is to blame. This is traumatic for everyone involved, but it is important to know you are not alone. Here at Minute Videos, we cover a wide range of topics that can often be hard for people to talk about, but we hope that by doing so, people will realize these things are much more common than you think, and there are people out there for you to talk to with similar experiences.